So up on the screen we have a picture of what is the largest pipe organ in the world, and it's not in a church. In fact, the two largest pipe organs in the world are not in churches. And they're within a couple hundred miles of us right here. That is Atlantic City Boardwalk Hall. And the other one is in the former Wanamaker's store in Philadelphia, Macy's. Those two are almost the same size, but they're immense, monstrous instruments. But what you are looking at is not the organ, just like this up here, this that I play every week, this is not the organ. This is not the organ. That's the console. That's the brain center of the instrument. It's where the musician sits. It's going to play, but it's not where the sound is made. The sound is made up there. And I know probably there are more than one or two of you who think that the pipes that you can see right here, or maybe right up there, are what makes all the sounds of the instrument, but that would not be correct. There's a lot more that lies behind. In fact, most of the instrument you cannot see. But some superlatives first when we're talking about the pipe organ. And if you are churchgoers and you have a pipe organ in your congregation, in your house of worship, some of these superlatives may be the reason why the instrument costs so much to take care of. First of all, it is the loudest instrument in the world. It is. And the only exception would be is if you went to, let's say, Giant Stadium for a rock concert and, you came out of there and you couldn't hear anymore. But that's amplified sound, so we're not talking about the same thing. We're talking about naturally produced sound, loudest in the world. It is the largest musical instrument in the world. Sure, there are instruments bigger than the Hilltop instrument, but not bigger than that one. So it's the biggest. It is the heaviest. One of the slides that you'll see somewhere down the road will show you one of the pedal pipes for this instrument up here. One, the low C, weighs in excess of 2,200 pounds. One pipe. Stanford University in California had to rebuild their balcony with more additional support because the instrument they were putting in would have forced the balcony to collapse. Yeah. It is the most complex musical instrument in the world. In fact, prior to the invention of the printing press, no other mechanical device was as complex as the early organ. And we're going back pretty far, right? Hundreds of years, and it's still the case. So, if we can go to the next slide, please. And there he is. That's J.S. Bach. Now, this is a painting or a sketch of some sort, but it says J.S. Bach alone with his music, practicing in a quiet balcony somewhere in northern Germany. But here's the misnomer about this picture. Bach isn't alone. You just can't see anybody else. But there would have had to have been at least one or two other people, probably one of his sons or two of his sons, and he had a whole bunch of them, like 13 sons, standing somewhere out of sight pumping the instrument. Okay, so until we electrified, and here's a good sketch of this. This guy kind of like walking on the bellows there, and he needed a little bit of help. And there's the organist playing. And this would have been probably a Baroque or a 17th century type of cutaway of the instrument. There are pipes in front of him, in front of the organist, near the ceiling, and there's also pipes behind him. We'll talk about that a little bit further down. But you needed that until electrification took place toward the 20th century. In fact, the first church that I played in 1969 had one of the first organs made by the M.P. Moeller Company out of Hagerstown, Maryland. And it was like their Opus 3. And it was put in 1898. And on the side of the organ case, there was an opening. where you reached in very carefully, and there was a big pull switch that turned the blower on. But that was the opening where they had the pump, where the kids would have stood over there and pumped. And there was a little warning on the console that said, you better nod over to them. Maybe they're goofing off because your pressure's going down. You could see it. You could see it on there. But anyway, if we can go to the next slide, please. So we have a little, maybe it's the next. We have a little video. Can you cue the video from there?
Guess not.
No, it's not allowing you to do that? No. Oh, son of a gun. All right. Hit it again. Go forward again. Let's see if we get a play arrow. Well, no matter. I can explain it.
Maybe if you leave the slideshow and then click on the
Yeah.
PowerPoint.
Can you do that, Bob?
What's that?
If you exit the slideshow, and you can probably click on the individual slide. Or maybe not. No, just out of the slideshow, just hit escape. No? Okay, well, if you can resume, I'll explain. So here we have a pipe, one pipe, and this is capable of playing one note. There it is. This is a flute, or a flue pipe. You see it has a stopper in the top. We'll talk about that in a little while. Every pipe is handmade. This should be engraved with the pitch that it's supposed to be, someplace. I don't see it, but then again, I don't have my glasses on. And, oh yeah, there it is. It's an F sharp, okay? And it would be tuned by moving the stopper up and down. Usually these pipes don't go out of tune very easily. You'll notice it's made out of wood. Every pipe in the pipe organ is handmade, okay? Either it's hand rolled. This one has been through the war and back, but you can see it's a very soft metal composition. In fact, I see, you see, I can actually bend it just like that. This is, well, it's really in trouble. So even back in the time of Bach, some pipes were made out of metal. The thing about it was, in northern Germany in the 18th century, something like this would have been very expensive. And Bach would run into arguments with Silbermann or with Schnitger, the two big organ builders of the time, over the fact that he wanted more metal pipes in his instrument. So we have got metal pipes, certainly up in northern Germany, wooden pipes, plenty of wood would have been available, and these would have been constructed so that they were of all shapes and lengths. So just like any other musical instrument, the longer the pipe, the lower the note. The shorter the pipe, the higher the note. Usually on a modern instrument, there are 61 notes on a keyboard. So you would need 61 different length pipes to run one, what we will call a stop, a voice. Okay, and if you look up at the facade of the organ up there, you can see that the pipes are of different lengths. Most of those pipes speak. In other words, there is an air line that is running. You can't see them. They're disguised, but they come up from underneath and they go into the foot of the pipe so that when I play a note, the pipe sounds. But it only sounds on the pipes that I have drawn from the console. In other words, if I don't want those copper-looking pipes to play, I don't select that stop. Okay? But, like I said, there are probably 1,500 other pipes behind that facade. All right? So the materials that are being used on this pipe and the shape of the pipe, as well as the metal and what alloy this happens to be, whether it's a mixture of tin and zinc, which many of them are, that's what makes it so soft, and the way this is constructed, that has everything to do with the way the pipe sounds. Oh, we went back. Okay. Let's go forward. Yes. So this is an an example of a very ancient pipe organ, which uses what is known as hydraulis. And hydraulis, hydro, stands for water. And so there are two tanks of water on either side of the instrument. So you'd have two people pumping into that water tank, and that water tank would raise the pressure of the air that's above the water, and so as they raised the pressure, the air would escape, and that would power the pipes. Okay? Very clever. This came out of Ptolemy, Egypt, so the Greeks in Egypt, Cleopatra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we're talking about at that time. So the Romans take over Egypt with Julius Caesar, et cetera, and they say, oh, what a nice instrument. Let's bring it back to Rome. So obviously, hydraulis, we're getting that Greek form of the word rather than the Egyptian. So they bring it back to Rome, and guess what? Did they put it in their basilicas? Did they bring it for their gods? No. So this instrument that is most associated with church buildings first got its use in the Roman Colosseum, where it was used for gladiator events. That's how scary it was, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, and it was played pretty much the same way. And there's quite a few pipes up there for such an ancient instrument. Okay, we can go to the next one, please. All right, so pipes are arranged by size, by rank, by division, by type, and by quality. Whoa, let's take one of those, each one at a time. So size we already talked about, and this picture I think has even a better illustration than just looking at the facade of our pipe organ. You can see that they are of different sizes, different widths, and if you look carefully, you can actually see that there are other pipes behind the front row of pipes. So it goes deep, all right? So that's size. But just like in an army term, a rank and file, right? So pipes are arranged in ranks. So you can see that they will start either small and go up to the largest and then go back to the smallest again, or sometimes they'll start on one side at the smallest and they'll go up to the biggest. And this has a lot to do with how much those pipes weigh. Because if you put all of your tall pipes on one side and all your short pipes on the other, you're going to imbalance the chest that it's sitting on, and you could have, some serious problems. But you can see when you look at our facade how balanced that is. You think, oh yeah, it's a nice little design. Well, it's a very utilitarian type of design. It's about the weight and the balance, okay? Division. So each instrument is built by division, except for our hydraulis example, which was just a one-unit instrument. The Hilltop instrument, the original Hilltop instrument, we're going to 1971 here, not back to 1860. The original one that was using a lot of these pipes had three divisions. It had what we'll call the great division, which is the lower keyboard. It had the swell division, which is the upper keyboard, and it had the pedal division, which you play with your feet. Now, since that time, since the rebuild of this instrument in 2003, we now have 5 divisions. We've got the swell, that is, as we mentioned before, the great, which you mentioned before, and now we have the choir. And the choir is the bottom manual, about this high, and the pedal. And we also have the gallery division, which is up there. Now, the gallery division floats. In other words, it can be played on whatever manual I choose to put it on. And I can put it on the great, I can put it on the choir, and I can also put it in the pedal. So we've got 5 divisions. An instrument like the convention hall instrument probably had as many as 20 divisions. All kinds of things, playable on whatever manual. Which brings up the question that so many people always ask, why does the organ have multiple keyboards? And that's really the reason, that you've got these families of sound that are sequestered all over the place. In the case of Boardwalk Hall, I don't know if you've ever been there, the old convention hall, remember? They used to have bowl football games in there, and maybe they still do, but a lot of those pipes are in the ceiling. They run the entire length of Convention Hall, the old Convention Hall. And so they're all over the place. And if the organist wants, he can have one of those divisions completely playing by themselves. Well, if you were playing the piano and you had a group of notes that you had to play, you still only have one keyboard. It's still going to sound like piano. But with the organ, you can set it up so that, okay, here's my trumpet. I want that up on this manual up here. I just want to go like this, and there's the trumpet sound. Meanwhile, I have other sounds on the other keyboards. But the neat thing is you can usually have all of those divisions playing at once on one keyboard by using what are known as couplers. Okay. And the type, we have flues and we have reeds. These are both flues. It doesn't matter whether it's metal or whether it's wood. A flue is just like in your chimney. It's just an open passage for the wind to go. The difference is with a flue, it goes over the lip of the pipe and it creates that sound. It's like blowing over a bottle and getting a sound. You dump a little more water out, the sound goes lower because you've got more of an air column. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether it looks like this or it looks like those up there. The exception now, the other type, are the reeds. And just like a clarinet, you would, if you were playing a clarinet, you would go get your little reed and you would attach it to the mouthpiece and you tighten it down, you'd blow in it to make sure it works. Okay, so the reed that's in a pipe organ pipe is a permanent reed. It's made out of brass or bronze. And the trumpet en chamade, which are the horizontal pipes facing you, those are reed pipes. But those are not the only reed pipes. We've got about 6 or 7 different types of reed pipes that are in the instrument. And the reed pipes give it color, but they also give it a heck of a lot more volume. These are the ones that will usually go out of tune first. Why do they go out of tune? Usually climate change more than anything else. And you know from these last couple of weeks, one day it's 80 degrees, the next day it's 20 degrees. Those wreak havoc on the pipes of the organ, especially the reed pipes. And so the organist sometimes has to go actually there and tune them. So I've done this quite a bit where I have to get up on a ladder and retune the en chamade pipes, the trumpet that's facing you. I'm not going inside the organ anymore. I'm too big for that. I can't fit. That's what I mean. I can't do that. I'm beyond that. All right, where are we? All right, can we go to the next slide? All right, why are they called stops? And so there's the picture. Now you can see on either side of these, of the keyboards, you see these controls. They look like large keys, like large skeleton keys. And those are the stops. And remember the phrase, pulling out all the stops. Well, in this instrument, I don't know when it was built, but it's certainly made to look like an instrument from the 18th century, kind that Bach would have played on. And those controls, each would have been attached, you can't see it, it's behind the console, to a very, very long rod. And as you pulled out the pipe, there would have been holes drilled in that long rod, that as you pulled them out, they would have lined up right beneath the holes in the wind chest that would allow that pipe to speak. So you got this air in the chest, it's pressurized air, these guys are pumping like crazy, and then you pull out the stop and you line up the holes, and now that particular set of pipes will speak if you hit the notes on the keyboard. So if you pull all of them out, you've pulled out all the stops. And the organ speaks at its loudest possible volume, at its loudest possible. There's probably a stop up there that takes maybe it's a very soft stop. So if you only wanted to play very softly, you only pull out one stop, maybe a stop for the pedal, and that's it. And we can do that same thing here. The difference is you can't see it here because this is a digital console. So when this instrument was rebuilt in 2003, Bob and former organist Peter Funke rebuilt they rebuilt this console like from scratch, basically. And they digitized it so that it's solid state. It doesn't have moving parts. So you can't see what they're talking about. So when I pull out the stops, it just means the console lights up more. But it's really the same thing in essence. So if I push the stop in, the pipe no longer speaks. The sound is stopped. Okay? All right. So it's a little more difficult to explain if you have a completely electronic organ, because you can't see it, you can't understand it. Okay, let's go to the next, please. So here's a good example of different shapes of pipes, and the ones that are the most unusual shapes are the reeds. And so you've got on the one side, you see it says number 1 is a principal. Well, there are principal pipes right up there. A flute next, a bigger, wider flute. Viol, the string pipes are actually tapered near the top, and it gives it a little bit more of a nasally sound. And then, as we get over a little bit more past center, now we're getting to the reed pipes. And you see there are all kinds of different shapes. And you'll see words up there that you may recognize, like trumpet, which is really not supposed to sound like a trumpet, but it can be played like you would fanfares and things like that. An oboe, which does sound remarkably like a big oboe. English horn, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these pipes also have reference back to the medieval time period. So you've got instruments like a crumhorn, a dulcian, barfife. These are instruments that would have been existing in medieval times, and because the organ comes from around that same time period, organ builders back in the late Renaissance and the early Baroque, they probably said to themselves, yeah, it sounds like that, let's call it that. Okay? And then you see an organ chamber, and this happens to be in the swell. And the reason I know that is because I can see the swell shades. You see those? It looks like a Venetian blind type of thing. All right, so we have that. In fact, I have it open and I have the light on inside, and you can see right into the swell. Why is it called the swell? Well, because if I sit down at the console and I close the swell, you're going to see the light disappear. So I can control those shades right here with one of my big foot pedals. There it is. And what does that do exactly? Well, we're going to use what is known as a smothered swell right here. Swell closed. You heard the difference? Yeah, because the organ pipe does not get louder on its own. In fact, it plays at the same volume it was built to play at 100% of the time. It can't get louder or softer. I can't hit the keyboard harder and make it sound louder like I can with the piano. The instrument is not touch sensitive in that respect. So the only way, and I don't know which genius organ builder hundreds of years ago figured this out, let's put a set of pipes, a division, into a different room, basically. So imagine if you were in this room and I was playing with all the stops out, but we have every window and door is closed, just like it is right now. And I'm playing, and somebody says, let's open the windows. What's going to let all the sound out? And that's exactly what the swell box does. You open up the shades and the sound comes out. Now, when this first happened, it used an unbalanced pedal, which meant basically it was either open or it was closed, one or the other. And then as the development of the pedal came into being, we could do it 10% and 20%, or we could smother it and close it all the way down, or all the way open. The choir manual works exactly the same way, so we could have 2 swell boxes up there enclosing all those pipes, but 2 different pedals. And if you are able to look at the console later, you'll see that there are 3 big pedals that I don't play with my feet like this, that I go whoosh like that. But the only thing is, on this instrument, since this is a hybrid instrument, it's not all pipe. It's got electronic components. And in 2013, I believe it was, we renovated the organ again to include 12 more stops that are all electronic. And the entire choir division is electronic. So yes, I've got one of those pedals, but there are no swell shades. It's just a volume control, so it acts like a swell shade. It's still the same thing. So I have control volume-wise over the choir and over the swell. The grate is unenclosed, which means what you see is what you get. It will always, those stops will always be the same, and so is the gallery. The gallery is all out in the open, and the pedal is, some of it's enclosed and some of it isn't enclosed. Okay? So, a question.
You said they're always the same volume.
Yes.
If you put more air through, does that?
No. Okay, so that's a really good question. So it's just like, anyone here play a wind instrument? Anyone play flute, clarinet, trumpet, something like that? Yeah? If you blow harder, what will happen? You'll go sharp. That's right. Or you'll know, clarinetists do this all the time, trumpet players do this all the time. It's called overblowing. So you can blow harder and you'll actually play a higher note. Okay? So yeah, if I blew harder into one of those pipes, I'd get a different note, but it wouldn't be the right note. So we set our pressure, our air pressure, so that the instrument constantly plays in tune and at the same volume. Okay? Now, yes, we can create a higher wind pressure for bigger effects, and we'll talk about that down the road a little bit too. But Bob, do you know what wind pressure this is on?
About 6 inches.
6 inches. That's 6 pounds per square inch. Okay? So if you think of it, if you want to know, just think of your tires on your car at 32 pounds per square inch, right? So 6 inches of pressure is pretty low pressure. It could go down to like 3 inches of pressure. But I can tell you that at the Atlantic City, Oregon, there are pipes that are on 100 inches of pressure. Cathedral of St. John the Divine has a trumpet en chamade that's on 50 inches of pressure, and so does Riverside Church. And when you look at those pipes, you'll see that there are chains attached to them. Why? Because if you played a note under 50 inches of pressure, the thing would take off like a rocket. That would be a fun thing to see on a Sunday morning, right? Right. Okay. So, those are the shapes of the pipes. There's the swell, and we are going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so this is principal diapason and Montre pipes. So here's an interesting thing. So pipe organs developed in northern Germany. They developed all over the place. It's just like, if you say, the bagpipe, that's an Irish instrument, or that's a Scottish instrument. Well, let me tell you, there are versions of bagpipes that came out of all kinds of different countries. They might not call them bagpipes. They certainly don't call them Highland pipes, but they work the same way. One of these types of things, where you're keeping the pressure on to keep the wind going, they come from all over Europe, probably even more than just Europe. So in northern Germany, if you were back in the time of Bach and you looked at these big metal pipes here, they would have been called principals. Principals, which, they were the basic part of the instrument, so they were your principal sound. If you went to France, those same type of pipes would be called montres. They're still principal pipes, but they're a different name. And if you went to England, they'd be called diapason. But they're the same basic principle. It's a metal pipe, and it's absolutely straight, perfectly up. It does not pinch toward the top. It just goes straight up. Now, what it's made out of, that'll give it a slightly different sound. And the scale of it and the pressure of it, but they're all basically the same type of pipe. Okay? Can we go to the next one, please? So here are our flutes and our strings. So we're looking at a string division. I believe this is Wanamaker's on the right-hand side. That's the string division. Those pipes actually narrow at the top. And they have a really, does it sound like a string orchestra? Absolutely not. Can you close your eyes and think you're listening to strings? Yeah, maybe. Okay? I can tell you that the one thing that is absolutely string-like is the violone, which is the largest of the string pipes. And you know, if you were listening to a bass fiddle and they drew their bow across the string, it would have like a little biting sound. And the articulation of the lowest violone kind of has that in there. It's pretty neat the way you hear that. And then you have the other flutes, and you can see that they're different shapes, they're different sizes. Some are wood, some are metal, some have little caps on the top, and let's talk about the little caps on the top. So once again, I don't know what genius thought of this, but this goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, certainly before the time of Bach. So you see we have the stopper in here, and I'm not going to try and remove it. Just by wiggling it, you can. It's the tuner, yes, but here is the freaky thing about it. When you stop a pipe with a stopper such as this is about, we'll say it's a 2-foot stop, just to be kind of close. When you stop the pipe, the acoustic property is it drops the pipe by an octave. So instead of this being a 2-foot pipe, it's now a 4-foot pipe. What if it was an 8-foot pipe? It would become the sound of a 16-foot pipe. Do you see any 16-foot pipes here? No. We have 16-foot pitches in this organ, but I can guarantee you they're all using this system because we have a limited amount of ceiling space. And the really big reeds can actually be mitered just like a sousaphone is wrapped around. It's still the same length of pipe, it's just wrapped around, okay? But, so think if you wanted to get a 32-foot pitch, that's the lowest, almost the lowest of the low, you only need a 16-foot pipe to get down to that pitch. Yes, John?
You mentioned that the longer pipes are the deeper pipes.
Yeah.
I look up there and I see different diameters.
Yes. So as they go higher and higher, they also get narrower and narrower.
Okay, does the diameter also affect the sound?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called scale. So you can have some, if you look, well, those are dummy pipes in the middle on the lower part. As we go up, it's just like when you think of, if you look inside a piano, you look down to the lowest strings, they're fat, and they're long, obviously. You go up to the top strings, they're very, very narrow. In fact, in the piano, it sometimes goes down to just one string instead of 3. So, yeah, definitely, everything that you're going to use to make the pipes is going to affect the overall sound. Okay? All right, next slide, please. Okay, so here we're talking about the reed, and there's the example of the permanent reed on the left-hand side. You can see that there is that vibrating object. And so there's a little pressure put on it, just like a ligature of a clarinet holds the reed in place. You've got that as well. All the different shaped reed pipes, you know, and yeah, they would be different pitches, but they're also different, made of different materials. You can see there's a copper pipe up there as well. That all contributes to the sound, to the overall sound. Let me just check so I don't miss something. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so we were talking about divisions, and here's a pretty good size instrument, and you can see that it's been labeled as to where the pipes are that control each division. You can see now that the pedal pipes are part of the facade. It's part of the design. So some of the biggest principal pipes are standing on those 2 towers at the side. And even still, you can't see what's behind the swell shades. There's a lot of pipes still hidden from view. And the thing about Convention Hall is if you go there, you can't see any pipes. They're all hidden from view. They're behind screens. You can't see them, but they're there. Okay, and I already spoke about the Hilltop organ having 5 divisions. Okay, next slide. All right, here's the pipe. This is in the building of the convention hall instrument, the boardwalk hall instrument, because there would have been lots of other pipes, and this is like the bottom, 8 or 9 pipes. But the gentleman is standing there, and he's holding a ruler, a 1-foot ruler in his fingers, and it's giving you perspective. That's a 32-foot open metal pipe, 2,200 pounds. Okay? And while we're talking about this, there is the Grand Ophioclyde. An Ophioclyde is they predate tubas and sousaphones. Marching bands during the Civil War would have used Ophioclydes instead of tubas. So in Boardwalk Hall, the Grand Ophioclyde is under 100 inches of wind pressure, and it holds the Guinness World Record for loudest. It's equal to 6 train whistles in loudness. Yeah, and so you don't want to be in the same room when that thing goes off without protective earwear. Loud as anything. But remember, the Boardwalk Hall is huge. Cathedral of St. John the Divine is huge. So for the sound to be effective, you've got to move air. Air travels like waves on the ocean. It just keeps rippling out. And it moves pretty quickly, but it has to travel and move that air to be effective. So the higher the wind pressure, the quicker that's going to cut through. Okay? More on that in a couple of minutes. Next one, please. Okay, so here are consoles. The brain center, the cockpit of the instrument. Okay? And I have them listed by the way we will get our sound. Draw knob, which is the one on the upper left. My personal favorite, by the way, but draw knob. And you can see now, since there's no bench there, you see the 3 pedals in the middle that go like this. The pedal board of 32 notes that is played with the feet, both feet, by the way. And then you see also the combination action, the toe studs, which are right above that. And if you were to examine the Hilltop console, you'll see a great many similarities there. Next one is rocker tabs, and that's basically what Hilltop has, are rocker tabs. You push down the bottom of it, the light comes on, the pipe will speak. You push up the top, the light goes off, the pipe is now silent. Mechanical action, which is the instrument all the way over on the right, upper right, and that is the fact that, and this is that going back to that molar that I mentioned in Jersey City, my first instrument. So before we have electricity, how do you push down a key and a contact is made and the pipe speaks, which is basically, that's all it takes here. I mean, it's complex, more complicated than I just explained. But if we were going back to the time of Bach and there's no electricity, how do you get the pipe to speak? Well, you push down the key, so the key goes down, and the other end of the key, which you can't see because it's inside the console, goes up. So when that goes up, it's pulling up another piece called a tracker. That tracker is hinged at the bottom, and it pulls this way, and it runs along the floor underneath all the pipes, and then it hinges again, or couples again, and it goes up to the wind chest, and it pulls down, and it opens up the air to let into the pipe. All of that going, and it happens just like that. So on that instrument that I mentioned in Jersey City, built in 1898, my first instrument, if you opened up the side doors and you walked in, you saw all the wooden trackers running right across the floor like that, okay? So that's why you had to be really careful where you stepped, because they were like balsa wood. And that's the Lutheran church, correct? You're a Lutheran church? It's tracker action, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's what Bach was playing on, that type of thing. So, and once again, those are the draw knobs that you had to really pull out a long way to get those stops to line up and speak. And then the other kind of draw knob is below, the lower one, and that's the French terraced deck. So if you went to Notre Dame in Paris, Saint-Sulpice, you would see that type of instrument. And they're very popular, especially the last decade or so. Lots of churches, when they replace their instruments, they want to get French-style desks. But you'll notice that if you're sitting in the middle of those consoles like that, you got to. So a lot of times, if you're not using your combination action, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you've got to actually have an assistant sitting on each side of you to be able to manipulate the stops, because one person can't do it. Okay, next, please. Okay, and then we've got the cases. Okay, so, you know, from the spectator point of view, from the congregational point of view, this is what you see. This is not what you hear, but this is what you see. So this is sometimes very, very important. If we went back to the end of the Victorian era, going into the turn of the century, into the 20th century, the way we would have looked at the case inside of a church, for the most part, would have been out of sight, out of mind. We didn't want to see the pipes. We maybe wanted to see a hint of pipes, but we didn't see maybe one rank of diapasons in the front, and sometimes we paint them gold, you know. But it was not like a lot of these examples. So the one right in the center, the lower center, hey, you're looking at it right now. There's the facade, okay, of the Hilltop instrument. But the oldest still functioning pipe organ in the world is this one all the way over on the left-hand side. That's in Zion, Switzerland. It's up in what's known as a sparrow's nest, which means it's hanging on the wall of the church. It's way above the floor, and it still works. And it dates back to like 1415. Still working. Okay? We've got, I believe the one next to that is St. Bavo's, the Mozart organ in Amsterdam. Next to that, on the top row, that is Wanamaker. You know the one on the right? That's the Mormon Tabernacle. Now, the Mormon Tabernacle, the original part of the instrument that was made in like the 1860s, Brigham Young type of era, would have been the two center columns, the highest ones, which were brought across the plains on ox cart. And and then the rest of it that goes out to the side, those are all the additions that happened since then. Okay? And that's the beautiful thing about pipe organs, too. You can always renovate, you can add, you can change. Yeah, it can also go with musical styles. I forget which one that is all the way over on the left. It's a pretty interesting case. But the one on the right, to the far right, that is the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. Yes, Rosales is the organ builder, and they liken the way they use their wood pipes there to a package of French fries. Every one of those pipes speaks, even though it kind of looks crazy. It doesn't look like that. It's all over the place, and it's a big instrument. Okay, next, please. Why do organs have multiple keyboards? Okay, and you can see it's soup to nuts. We can have one keyboard, we can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Atlantic City has 7 keyboards. Which begs the question, if you were sitting on the bench, can you reach the top keyboard? It depends on how tall you are. So if you are 5'2", you're going to have a problem. So what you would do is the sounds that are attributed to that keyboard can then be coupled down to another keyboard they can actually reach. You know, there are some people, shorter people, have trouble playing 4 keyboard instruments, reaching that top keyboard. That's a stretch. Okay, so 7 keyboards, yeah. And the difference about Atlantic City, if you look, that's the one on the upper right, is you can see that the keyboards are not the same length. The bottom 3 keyboards or so are 88 keys, just like a piano. And the rest are 61. And you see, You see on that, as you go higher and higher and higher, the keyboard gets more and more slanted this way so you can play it easier. Okay, next please. This is St. John the Divine, the largest Gothic cathedral in the world in New York City, 125th Street. And so you see it's the one on the left-hand side. That is their great rose window. I don't know if anyone has been to St. John the Divine. You know, take the vertical tour. It's the most wonderful thing. You just go out and you look out down to lower Manhattan from the top of the building. But St. John the Divine has like a 150-foot ceiling. And so this rose window, which is at the west end of the building, if you look carefully, right in the center of the rose is Jesus. Jesus is 6 feet tall. Okay? So that kind of tells you something. And there's the enchimade, those vertical pipes. It's called the state trumpet. It's on 50 inches of wind. The rest of the organ is by the altar, 601 feet away. There is almost a half-second delay between when the organist hits the key and when he hears the sound, even under 50 inches of wind pressure. So it's kind of difficult to do that, to go, okay, but I'm not going to listen for this, even though I have to play them together. So it's a little tricky. But it's one of the most famous of the enchimade pipes. And there you have other enchimade examples next to that. Vertical pipes. Okay? Next one, please. And next week you will hear our enchimade. It's as loud as the entire rest of the instrument. So I can be playing all the other stops, and then I play the enchimade, and the enchimade will just cut right through. Okay. This is a good example of the pedals. You see the 3 pedals that are in the center. For every enclosed division, in other words, pipe divisions that are in boxes behind those shades, you would add another one of those pedals. The pedal that is to the far right of the 3 is what's known as the crescendo pedal. Now, the crescendo pedal brings on sets of pipes automatically. So I might have anything drawn, and I can start bringing that pedal on, and it's going to bring on up to almost full organ. And I can show you that as an example. Because right now, nothing, the organ is on, but there's nothing registered on the organ. No lights are showing. And I'm going to sit down here. I'm opening up the swell. So I'm putting my hands now on the center manual. I'm going to start opening up. I'm just slowly opening this. Okay? So that's what the crescendo pedal does. And you would say to yourself, well, why would you do that? Well, oops, I lost my mic. I used it a lot today, actually, in the postlude. I used it in the prelude as well. You just can add layers of pipes, divisions of pipes. It couples everything, so you get up to that full organ. The gentleman in the next picture, in that right-hand picture, is actually tuning the pipes. And it's interesting because he has to walk on a catwalk. Now, if you have a piano and you get your piano tuned, I can guarantee you your tuner will probably start right in the middle of the piano, and then it'll go out to the sides, and it'll tune every single one of those 88 keys. Pipe organ tuner does not regularly do that. What they'll do is they'll pull out each stop one at a time, and they'll listen to see if there are any major issues, because tuning thousands of pipes is a long process, and it's definitely a 2-person job. Somebody has to play the notes at the console, and somebody has to go inside the chamber and actually tune the pipe. And they tune one pipe to the next pipe, and it's pretty easy to do, but it's backbreaking, as you can imagine. And you also have to have a pretty good sense of balance and be able to fit on the catwalks. And sometimes, yeah, you can see that what he's bending over, you see that there's another catwalk that's going deeper into the organ. Can you imagine getting up on that and then having to lean over to tune the pipes? Yeah, it's not that easy to do. Okay, next one, please. All right, so this is the combination action, and there's two different kinds. So the picture up on the left-hand side shows these little buttons, okay? So remember the stops, the draw knobs that were off to the side like that, you know, and you have to yank them out. Well, as we got electricity and we got the idea of pneumatics, of the idea that you had air running through the console and you could push something and the air pressure of that pneumatic tube could actually move the stops without you touching them. All right, solid state is the next advance, but pneumatics certainly and electric action. So what we could do is we could bring on a combination of stops, and then by using the setter button, you can see that on the lower left, you would hold in the setter button, and you would choose which one of those buttons will bring on those stops. So that, just like that, you could change everything. You could go from full organ down to almost next to nothing. Or you could bring on solo stops or whatever you wanted to do, but you wouldn't have to have that assistant on each side of you quickly going, you could do it just like that. Just like that crescendo pedal could bring it on, so can that. So if I go over to the console right here and I hit my, I know what this is on right now. Hopefully I won't pull out my mic if I don't sit on the wire. And I've got this right here, and this is pretty loud. But here's everything. Just by hitting another button. Or, and I can set every manual different, pedal different, use the gallery if I want, and it's instantaneous. But, you know, sometimes your hands are really, really busy. For Easter, I play this piece by Jean-Marie Widor, the Widor Toccata, this. Well, from the beginning of that piece to the end of the piece, my fingers never stop. So if I wanted to change some stops, how would I do that? Well, I'd have to stop playing with one of my hands and hit one of those buttons, or in the lower left-hand side, you see a toe stud. If my feet aren't busy, I can just kick one of those, providing, of course, I kick the right one, and that will change it. And that's exactly what we have here as well. I can change my sound simply by kicking one of those. Okay? Now, what we have on the right-hand side is like an earlier system of this. This is really fancy. This is from France. And there was an organ builder in France during the Romantic period, that would have been the 19th century, named Ariste Cavalli-Cole. And he came up with what are known as ventals. And you see the two big pedals that are there, that's to open the swells, etc. But then you see that there are what do you call these hitch downs, and those are those other levers. Okay, so the pipes are sitting on a wind chest. So what if we had fluids on one side of the wind chest, the diapasons, the flutes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and on this side of the wind chest we had reeds, big reeds. So by bringing on, but if I have that pull-down hitch up, now I only have my flues that are operating. But if I push down that one device and it's a hitch, in other words, I push it down into the side and it catches, it allows the air to travel to the other side of the wind chest, and the reeds now work. So this is the way the music of César Franck and Widor that we just heard, that on those instruments that they played, that's how they would have brought on additional sounds. They're called ventals, like ventilator, you know, just letting the air through. Kind of complicated. But when we get to the 20th century, those little push buttons, that did the trick very nicely. Okay, next one please, Bob. Okay. Mechanical action, we talked about this a bit, but we're talking now about the Rückpositiv. Once again, now we're in German, okay? And the Rückpositiv, if you look at the bottom of the picture, there's another division, and it's basically looking like it's hanging over the gallery wall. Okay, imagine in our church it would be like we'd have a division just sitting right there. And usually the organist is sitting between that little division in the front and the big division in the back. Because in mechanical action, remember you have the trackers, and the trackers can go underneath the main part of the organ, but they also can go underneath the organist toward the gallery. So it made it easier to put another division, but move those trackers, you know, underneath the organist. And that's the Rückpositiv, or the back positive. All right, once again, no swell, a positive is usually unenclosed. And that would have had some lighter sounding sets of pipes there as well compared to the bigger pipes that were in the main part of the case. So, interesting thing though, so I mentioned this before, so lots of organs developed in Germany. Certainly this one is German. It's got German names, right? And others developed in France, others developed in England. What about us? Well, in the 20th century, mid-20th century, organ builders over here in the United States decided, well, we could build a German instrument, we could build a French instrument, or an English instrument, but we're not any of those, we're Americans. Let's come up with our own kind of instrument. So they came up with what they called the American Classic. This is an American Classic, which means that when you look at the names that are on the stops, they're not in English, not all of them, some are French, and some are German. So if you're a aspiring organist, you're learning these three languages, you look at this and it can be confusing because you're looking at what your music is saying, use this diapason right here. But meanwhile, your instrument doesn't have diapasons, it's got mantras or it's got principles. And yes, that's what you would draw. So you have to kind of learn what the historical significance of the instrument you're playing on is all about. Do we have another slide, please, Bob? Oh, there's that oldest working pipe organ. We can go next, please. And here's the Hilltop Church. So there's our timeline for this particular instrument. So just like, I don't know with Mr. Hartman and Mr. Beatty, when they put in the instrument in 1971, if they retained any of the pipes from the previous organ that was here, it's very possible they did. But yeah, because they would have been expensive to replace. And yeah, so they did, and that's very, very common for organ builders. So a lot of times when you say, well, we need a new organ for the church, the pipes are the most expensive part, so let's retain whatever we can. Maybe we can repurpose them, especially the biggest ones because they are so expensive. Thousands and thousands of dollars just for, let's say, 12 pipes to make a lowest octave of the pedal. So, Funky Willis in 2003 would have retained, did you retain all the pipes from the previous instrument?
Oh, one or two got replaced.
Yeah.
But that was just two individual pipes.
Yeah. And then you added to it. And you added to it, especially all of this, plus all of the gallery. But all those pipes were donated, yeah. And then we added the hybrid module. Now, there were already some electronic stops in the instrument from 2003, especially the lowest. So we've got 32 length pipes. So I don't know how tall the ceiling is here, but I don't think it's 32 feet. So if you were to stand up a pipe like you saw in the Atlantic City picture, it would go through the roof. So how do you get that pitch? Well, in a smaller church like this, you do it electronically. And at that pitch, you can't tell the difference. You really, really can't. And it still vibrates the windows of the church, which it should. It should. And then the Enchimade was enhanced in 2020. So there are what, 28 Entremod pipes in the front? The original.
Yeah, 28.
28. So you see them. But that means I could have only played this much range on the keyboard. So the upper notes and the lower notes would just be non-existent. So I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. So the builder came in and we added 2 more pipes, and we were able to, by wiring and configuring, we were able, and reprogramming, we were able to, they were able to, because I had nothing to do with it, bring it playable to 3 different pitches for the entire length of the keyboard. So that really made that set of pipes more usable. Okay, so next. Now we're going to see a bunch of pictures of the building, and probably, I know, Don, you were here for this. Anyone else here to do this? Yeah, this was, except for Peter Funke, it was all members of the church, Peter and Bob together. It was like, you know, they always wanted to build a pipe organ. Well, this was it. And so you can see they've got, in these pictures, they've got the facade pretty much taken out. All right, so we can go to the next one. You're going to see some people you know, I think, in some of these pictures. Once again, we're looking at the facade of the main organ. Okay, Bob. Oh, there's Bob right there. He's inside. A very precarious position. Okay, next. So there are new pipes that were donated, and here they are. They're out in the congregation there. They're just laying out there. And of course, you have to put the right one in the right slot. And you can see they're all different sizes. This is when they were brand new. Okay, Bob. The middle picture is very important because that's the blower. It's actually the blower that goes to the gallery organ. And actually, all these pictures are of the gallery organ from my point of view up here. You can see the Wynne trunks going out underneath, probably to the pedal pipes. But you have to, and if I stop talking, you can actually hear the wind hissing from the unit that is below us down here. So there's two blowers, Bob?
Yeah.
One big one here, the other one that's up there. Okay, next. This is the gallery unit from 2 different perspectives. So if you've never been up in the gallery, you might not realize it, because some people will say, oh, there's another whole organ up there. Yes and no. Because you can see there's a 1 keyboard and pedal organ up there underneath those half dozen or so stops that are up in the gallery. But that entire unit is playable from this instrument, and I use it every week. And you can, if you're sitting in a really good place, like maybe right here, and I'm going back and forth between the 2, you can hear that. But usually I'll use the gallery organ to, if there are a lot of people up in the gallery and they're singing, it really helps them know where they are in the hymn. It helps a lot. Plus it's got little different colors in there, and so it's interesting to use it. Okay, next please. These are wind chests, that first picture, and you can see the ranks of pipes sitting now in the wind chest, including some stopped pedal pipes you can see that are laying sideways. Yep, okay, we can go to the next one. All right. Yes?
Where is the manufacturer? Who's making this stuff?
Who's making this stuff? Well, smaller pipe organ companies such as, I think Hartman Beatty would have been one of them. I don't think they actually made their pipes, but they would have gone to a pipe supplier. And so, you know, there's always this debate between the really big companies that are out there, like Austin and Casavant. They would have said, well, you know, we make all our pipes. So there's a bit of snobbery about that. Somebody makes the other pipes too, you know. It's just that they don't call them Casavant, they don't call them Austin pipes. So they got their hands on pipes, and they probably, you know, had to do all the wiring and all the other configuration. An interesting thing is, though, that every pipe builder will build the organ twice. They will build it in their workshop entirely, setting it up in the workshop to make sure that everything works. I mean, with the exception maybe of the ornamental wood of the facade here, they will build this entire structure, and then after they test it, they take it down, and then they bring it over here and they install it. And then once again, then they go through the voicing procedure to make sure that the instrument is voiced to the sound that they want in the church. So for anyone who always says, who likes to say, the organ's too loud, that's not true. The organ can only go up to a certain volume, and it's been regulated to be loud is supposed to be loud, and soft is supposed to be soft, and everything in between. Okay, and so we've got a lot of wiring, and I know that the story was, because I wasn't here when this happened, that you ran wire, through the attic?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, miles of it.
and underneath the sanctuary.
And underneath the sanctuary too, so yeah, and I know the congregation, this was a whole congregation event. But I'm sure a few people worked on it more than others. We're waiting to see your picture, Don. Okay, and there's Bob. He's working on the console there, putting it together. Okay, next one, please. Aha. Is that you, Don? Yeah. I think that's Peter. Yeah, it's Peter. Yep, they're putting it together, putting the facade together. Next one, please. There's Bob again inside the organ. I think he's sitting on a bellows there, right? Yeah.
We're putting in a new bellows, it's been rebuilt.
Yeah, and you can see in the picture on the right, you can see a lot further into the instrument than you can right now, because none of the screening is on. That kind of prevents you from seeing that. It doesn't stop the sound, it just stops what you can see. And next. And that's blank. I thought I have an ending slide, but I guess I didn't. That was it. Okay, so now comes the audience participation. Questions?
Just one, or a couple. You call this a 2003 order. How long did you guys work on this one?
About 40 years, we
I thought it
started
was longer
in
than that.
1999.
This was a huge,
A huge project, yeah, absolutely. And Peter donated the gallery, is that true? Yeah, he had that in his garage or something? Yeah. Yeah.
He had an addition on his house, and that's where he had his work.
Oh, you knew him too?
We knew the funky.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when I was studying undergraduate, I was at Montclair, and my organ professor's name, Russell Hayton, he was organist at St. James Episcopal Church in Upper Montclair. He was such a nice man, and he had the nickname Elmer Fudd because he yeah, but. So anyway, he had a 2-manual pipe organ dismantled in his garage. And we all knew this, all the organ students knew this. And I thought to myself, I think I want that for my house, except I lived in my grandparents' house. At the time, it was a 3-family house. And I was thinking, how am I going to do this? Well, we can put the pipes in the basement, and we'll cut grills. And so my father and I actually went out. He would have given it to us. Console, the pipes, the blower, the whole 9 yards. But it was ridiculous, you know. It wasn't going to happen. But in Peter Funky's case, it did happen. He had this, and he said, oh, I'm going to give it. You realize how many thousands of dollars that alone is worth up there? Do you realize that replacing this instrument would cost over $1 million? Over $1 million. The console alone is probably in excess of $50,000. Depending on...
Got it for nothing from a garage in Atlantic City.
Yeah, so, yeah, but you have to have the people who know what they're doing. That was the first part, you know. I would not know where to begin. I just play the thing, you know. I don't necessarily, I can tune it, but, yeah. Any questions? Yes?
So there's a lot of variety from pipe organ to pipe organ and how many registers they have. And how
Yes.
many
Yeah, they're all custom.
right? So, you know, you get a Bach piece or something.
Mhm.
For
Well, that's a great question, because first of all, Bach almost invariably leaves no tempo marking, so you don't know how fast the thing is supposed to go. So it is left up to the discretion of the organist to a certain extent, but there is performance practice. In other words, there's a set of standards that's handed down from organist to organist over the generations. This is what Bach meant to sound like. This is how he would have registered it. And sometimes there are clear writings, but it could have been whoever edited his works. Because remember, he was writing them for himself and for his sons, and not necessarily to be published. So we don't know. Now, other organists that are certainly after the time of Bach, they will write specific registrations. This is what you should use. This is the keyboard you should use. This is the speed. To give you a metronome marking. But even at that, you can't always say, okay, the instrument that I'm playing has those things. So you have to make certain adjustments, but you try to get as close as possible to what you think. So a lot of it is in the study, you know, of how long you've studied playing the instrument.
But it sounds as if I heard one piece played by an organist on one organ. I've heard one piece played by one organist on one organ, and if I hear the same piece on another organ,
It will sound different, yeah.
quite a bit different.
Yeah, because it has to do with how complete the instrument is. This instrument is not complete in certain respects. It doesn't have all the choruses that it should have, but it's still very effective. And just remember, especially Hilltop people, this is a small instrument. This would still be considered a small instrument. Okay? It goes by number of pipes. This is 2,100 something pipes? Yeah.
400 up here.
Yeah, and there's 400 in the back and the rest are in there. And of course then the digital voices, which kind of add on, but they really don't. They don't officially. Compared to Atlantic City, which is, what, 14,000 pipes? Yeah, it's a big difference. We don't, I mean, that's like the sublime to the ridiculous, right? So playing Atlantic City is like, it'd be fun to do, but it's a kind of crazy instrument.
I was told that the Wanamaker's
Yeah.
30,000.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. 30,000 pipes, yeah, that would make sense. And Atlantic City would even more.
Yeah, it's over 40,000.
40,000? Yeah. So the largest instruments in the world, if you go on, you Google, what are the largest pipe organs in the world? Most of them are in the United States, and a lot of them are right around here. Largest church organ in the world. Where is it? West Point. West Point. So that's not so far. But on that top 20 list or so, Longwood Gardens outside of Philadelphia. Riverside Church, St. Bartholomew's Church, both in New York City. Trinity Church, Wall Street, that's, yeah, pretty large. Yeah. Fairleigh Dickinson, I don't think so. I don't think so. There was one of the houses that were one of the original houses at Fairleigh, that had a pipe organ in it. I don't know if that's, is it still there? Oh, it is. I hope they take care of it. Someone was telling me at Oratorio just a couple of weeks ago that their home church, they just received from Paragallo, our person that does the maintenance on this instrument, the tuning, etc. Their instrument is in bad shape, and it would cost over $1 million. That's what they got from Paragallo to fix the instrument. So they're considering ripping it all out and just going electronic, because then you don't have to tune it anymore. But they're giving away, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of investment. And I can also tell you that Westside Presbyterian Church, John knows it quite well, in Ridgewood, had a beautiful pipe organ, and then the church burned down. And the church did not have enough insurance to cover the replacement of both the building, the music, everything, plus put in a comparable pipe organ. So they had to go take out a loan to put in the organ. And it's still not, I don't think they finished the total amount of specifications that they wanted for the organ. They had to stop because they ran out of money. But yeah, it's really important. Another Presbyterian church in Englewood, same thing happened. The church burned down, and it was a beautiful instrument that I heard played when it was brand new, when I was a teenager. But yeah, so you have to be careful that you can replace these things, because this is the biggest investment that the church will make. Probably more than the building itself is the pipe organ. Anything else? So I taught, yes?
Remembers Christmas time about? We were here for Christmas and you had to climb into the organ.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We had to stop.
Yeah, well, but this happens. Sometimes a moving part will get stuck, and he does this all the time. I mean, it's great having him. Otherwise, it would be a $400 call to the maintenance company to come out, and Bob fixes it regularly. I'll say, wow, Bob, something's sticking out. Okay, I'll look at it. It's great having an organ curator. Anyway, anything else?
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So next week, it'll be more about the music that's written, and instead of having a slideshow, we're actually going to have a camera, at least this is the plan, camera on using, we'll use the screen so you can see me playing, so you can get closer. But if you were, like, with this amount of people, you could not see, and plus it's kind of tricky up there with the stairs the way they are. We don't want anyone falling. But yeah, if you want to walk up and see what the console's like, then you can do that now while I'm shutting things down. But thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.